Carolyn Steele challenged us to cook an entire meal using the least amount of energy possible. We accepted that challenge. Hi, I'm Jonathan, the Provident Prepper. Times of scarcity may require that we do the very best we can with minimal resources. Today we are cooking this meal simply using this rocket stove, some sticks that we gathered from our orchard, and basic food storage items. Stay tuned.
One of our viewers, Carolyn Steele, threw down a challenge that we just couldn't resist. She said one thing that would be helpful to me is a demonstration video where suppose you were down to rationing the last bit of fuel and you had to cook an entire meal using the least energy possible, the bare minimum of prep, fuel, pots, dishes, etc. If we ever found ourselves in a situation of scarcity, we may need to know how to make the most out of very little. And I completely agree with you, Carolyn. So this is kind of a fun challenge for us. Your situation is going to be different than ours, but for us, we feed a lot of people. If we were in a situation where we were down to rationing our fuel, we would probably be eating from our basic food storage also. So we decided to cook this meal using basic food storage and not any of the canned products that we have. So we took from our stored staples, beans, flour, salt, chili powder, cumin, and some ham fat that we had in the freezer. And then the foods that we produced at home that we used are eggs, onion, garlic, chili peppers, bone broth, peaches, and apricot nectar. And the fuel that we decided to use for the fire wasn't anything that we had stored. I just went out into the orchard and I picked up the sticks from some of the spring prunings, and we decided to use those. As John and I discussed how we could use the least amount of fuel possible, we decided that we needed to employ every strategy that we knew how to use. The first one being how to reduce the cooking time.
Because we are using dry beans, we wanted to soak them, and we soaked them overnight to help reduce that cooking time. One of the other things that we did was cut the food into small pieces. That's another principle of being able to use less fuel to cook something, is to have it in small pieces. We decided to use our biomass cook stove, also known as the rocket stove, because it uses fuel very efficiently. We also decided to use our pressure cooker because that is another very efficient cooking device.
We sauteed the vegetables and the ham fat in the bottom of the pressure cooker. Then we added the soaked beans and the spices, and we brought it up to pressure.
We then immediately transferred it into our retained heat cooker. So we're trying to use every device and every means we can to conserve that energy and that heat.
We added one more layer of insulation to that retained heat cooker to make sure that we could conserve as much of that energy as we possibly could. While the beans finished cooking, we cooked our flatbread. This flatbread is intended to be a nutritional complement to the beans, and it has both corn and flour in it. The batter is very thin, so that when we put it on the pan, it will cook very quickly. And unfortunately, because of the timing, we can't eat the flatbread warm. It will be cold when we eat the beans, but there were some of them that were snagged while they were still warm.
We served this meal with bottled peaches and apricot nectar to help enhance the nutrients and to make it more enjoyable. And of course, that didn't require any additional fuel at this time.
And voila! Dinner is served.
This is a visual representation of our total fuel usage. So you can see that we did use some of the sticks, but there was still a bunch of them left when we got done. Just an indication of how efficient that rocket stove was.
Here's a recipe for my Chevy's beans, which is a total family favorite. One of the things, if we're in a scarcity situation, you may not have all of the ingredients that you would normally put in a recipe, and you'll need to substitute. And that is one of the things that we did here. We didn't have any bacon, but we had the ham fat. And actually, quite frankly, a lot of times I make this recipe without any of the fat in it at all. And we didn't use the chopped green chilies, but we used chilies from our garden that we had put in the freezer earlier this year. Now, as far as the survival flatbread goes, this is actually delicious. It has a sourdough base. Click the card in the corner to learn more about cooking with sourdough. But you can make a flatbread with only flour, water, salt, and a little bit of oil. Here we have eggs because we produce them on a regular basis, and we were able to make this just into a delicious standalone kind of flatbread.
We want to thank Carolyn for throwing down this challenge. We've had some fun with it, and we've learned some things in the process. Google theprovidentprepper.org and look at some of our posts and our videos on YouTube. These include Grid Down Cooking Challenge and Emergency Solar Cooking. And by the way, if we had had good sun today, we would have been doing this using our solar cooker because that solar energy is absolutely free.
And the menu would have been a little bit different too. We still could have made the beans, which is fine, but I would have made real cornbread to go with the beans because that turns out fantastic in a solar oven. I can't really do that very well on the biomass stove.
Not bad for some basic food storage and a few sticks. And now we pass the challenge along to you. How would you cook a meal if you were down to rationing the last little bit of fuel? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.